everybody, this is Nathan on Shuffle, and I've got a really special album spotlight that I wanted to do today. This is for a new band, to me at least. I think this is actually their second album, but this is a band that I've only discovered over the past few weeks as I've heard this album. I believe this album actually came out a little bit earlier in the year, maybe March is what I want to say for a release date, but I've only found out about it over the past several weeks. And the band is called Turbulence, and the album is Frontal. I really love this wholeheartedly. This is a huge recommendation for me. It's one of my favorite albums of the year so far, I believe. It's just really blew me out of the water, especially for a band that I was unfamiliar with. You know, usually my favorites of the year tend to be the artists that I'm just super in love with and that I'm so excited for each of their album releases. But this is a cool album that just kind of came out of nowhere and really was fun to me to unpack and to discover. This is a band from Lebanon, which is also a cool thing that they're from an area that I'm less familiar with. I don't know of any other bands from there. And so this was kind of a cool feature, you know, a cool way for me to expand my taste a little bit into, you know, different places where music can be from. And what's been really cool is this has reignited a little bit of my love for progressive metal. So as a little bit of a disclaimer, this is a very heavy album. You know, this is heavy prog metal. So if you're not into the more metal side of prog, this might not be for you. But if you really embrace that and love prog metal, then this is really going to be up your alley, I think. So there's a lot of influence from Dream Theater and also from Haken. I think those are the two biggest references that I can hear to give you an idea of the sound to expect on the album. But they infuse their own style into it as well. They don't sound exactly like Dream Theater or Haken. Maybe certain sections feel very inspired, but other sections are just them doing their own thing, and there's so much complexity and so much heaviness and so much beauty in the vocals and in the different sections and in the instrumentation. They're all master players of their instruments, so this is a high recommendation, as I've said. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about my history with progressive metal, very briefly. When I was first getting into modern prog, I've talked about my story quite a bit. Prog metal took me a little bit more time to get used to. I liked kind of the more symphonic side of things because it more spoke to me of the classic prog that my dad showed me. But once I got Metropolis Part 2 by Dream Theater, Scenes from a Memory, everything changed for me, and that started kind of an obsession for prog metal back when I was discovering it in the early 2000s. And some of my favorite bands of those days were Dream Theater and Symphony X and Pain of Salvation, were some of the big touchstones of bands that really spoke to me. And so, but over time, I feel like I drifted away from it a little bit. I still loved those kind of seminal bands from the genre, but I was finding a lot of new progressive metal to be a little bit derivative of those bands, and to not really be bringing much new to the genre. And so, and I think I was just starting to dislike the heaviness of it. As I was getting older, I think I just didn't care as much about, you know, these heavy, intense riffs and darkness. And, you know, I was liking things that were a little bit more lighter, a little bit more fun, and had a little bit of, you know, more uplifting in a sense, more positive. That was kind of the vibe that was speaking more to me. But then I discovered Haken, which kind of reignited my prog metal love, because to me, they're the great blend of bringing back this, you know, heavy progressive metal style, but then infusing fun and varied instrumental sections and pulling from different genres and just really having a blast with the music. So to me, they're the kind of the new benchmark for progressive metal. And I feel like this band, Turbulence, really fits in that realm. And I feel the same way listening to this as I did listening to Aquarius by Haken back in the day when I first heard that. And so it brings that to mind, which to me is high praise. You know, that shows that they're on a level that's really top tier in the progressive metal genre, and shows that they have a lot of variety on display. It's not, because I think that was the trouble with me with progressive metal, is it's too samey. You hear the same kind of riffs over and over, and I feel like get kind of beat over the head with it, and it's kind of can feel a little relentless. And when you hear that over the course of like a 60-minute album, it could just be a little bit tough for me to get through, because it's so much of that same sound, that same heaviness, and I need a little bit of variety and light and shade to kind of balance that out. And I feel like this band does that really well. And of course, there's extreme heaviness, so I'm not saying it's not heavy, but they balance it out with moments of pulling in jazzy influences into their music, or pulling in kind of a ballad feel, pulling in different things, a funk-inspired bass line, things like that that really bring the variety and really make for an interesting, varied listen. I really like the vocalist. I think he's really a fantastic vocalist. Yeah, the vocalist is Omar El Hage, a really fantastic vocalist that to me sounds a bit like Ray Alder is kind of the vibe I get from Fate's Warning and Redemption. He has that sort of sound quality, but it's just his voice is really expressive and really fits the music really well. So it's one of my favorite features. But of course the guitar playing is epic. The synth lines and different keyboard sounds that come throughout are just really tastefully done and really expertly crafted. Great bass lines, great drumming, which is really fantastic. There's a lot of complex rhythms and polyrhythms and different things going on in all of these songs, and so he keeps up really expertly. So there's just so much on display, so much that they're showcasing. It's almost overwhelming in a first listen to hear all these different disparate elements, and it kind of washes over you at first, and it's like, man, there's some complexity here, there's some craziness. It really runs the gamut. Going through a little bit of the tracks, I love the opening track, Inside the Gauge, is the perfect opener that kind of gives you an idea of what you can expect. It even starts with some like glitchy electronica to show that they are willing to bring in elements from even modern music. There's some great synth playing, aggressive guitars, and crunchiness. It really shows you all of the features that they have. Great music, great melodic guitar playing, a guitar solo 7 minutes in is just really sublime, and great sections that just go from one thing to the next pretty seamlessly for me. Madness Unforeseen is the next track, and each of these tracks lead into the next. I should have mentioned at the outset, this is really a concept album, and an interesting one at that. They talk about it on their website, that it's based on the true story of Phineas Gage, a construction worker who survived an accident where an iron rod was driven through his head and destroyed much of his frontal lobe. That's why it's called Frontal, leaving him physically and mentally changed. And the album delves into that story. And so it's a great concept to base an album around, and it really moves through each track, seamlessly. It kind of fades right into the next track. And I love that. I'm a big sucker for concept albums, which should be pretty apparent if you've watched a lot of my videos. I love that about prog, that the albums tell a story and they move from one thing to the next. I love Madness Unforeseen. It's a great taster. I think they released this as maybe the single for the album, and it just showcases their energy and the heaviness that they can do. And there's just some jazziness. There's a jazzy guitar solo, and then they go into this, like I said, electronica or dubstep kind of section. A lot of variety and instrumental stuff going on, similar to Haken. It's really cool and well done. In one of the shorter-ish tracks, a lot of the tracks on here are pretty lengthy, go almost to like 10 minutes or so in length. But this one is a little bit shorter than that and gives you kind of a good taste of what you can expect for the album. So seek that one out if you're looking for kind of a taste of what this album's about. Dreamless is one of the shorter tracks. Kind of a little bit more laid back and atmospheric before heading straight, head forward into Ignite, which is one of the biggest, heaviest, intense moments of the album. And just as a fair warning, I'm not really into the growling vocals, the kind of Cookie Monster vocals, as it were. I like a little bit, I like some of Opeth's stuff, but it's not really my favorite. I don't like that over-the-top aggressiveness. But there's a little bit of that at the start of this track, but it's only really concentrated here. It's not really on very much of the album at all. It just is kind of giving you that aggressive feel for this track here. But there's a lot of variety. It's not just that intenseness. There's sections in this track that are a little bit more acoustic and laid back with some great vocals and some intricate drum rhythms. And of course that jazzy vibe. They have a lot of that in here, some of the jazziness in their instrumentation, which really speaks to me. I love that kind of sound. And the end section, to me, is where it really gets very inspired by Haken. It almost sounds like something off of maybe like their Visions record, just that crazy instrumental stuff that they tend to throw into their mixture, I think is definitely embedded into this track. And also in the next track, A Place I Go to Hide, which has a lot of that as well. There's a section in the second half that just really reminds me of like Puzzle Box from Vector by Haken. It's just, it has that intricate vibe to it of just all these, and it's heavy and it has all these different things going on. So I really appreciate that. I'm a big sucker for that kind of instrumental insanity, as it were. Just, it provides a lot of variety and interest, and it just amazes me that these players can do this and make this kind of complex music. So that's what I come to Prague for, and what they do extremely well. So A Place I Go to Hide is another highlight of the record for me. There's some funky bass lines at the beginning, some jazzy moments, great instrumental riffs and sections. So everything you come to love from progressive metal is all wrapped and tied into this. Crowbar Case is maybe one of the more interesting, unique type pieces on the album. It's very heavy again, with some crunchy riffs, aggressive synths, but there's some sections where there's kind of this bouncy, almost fun melody that kind of leads you through a different section. So once again, providing variety and not just unrelenting heaviness, but there's a lot of different light and shade that they're playing with, and they just really have an intense sound. Towards the end of this track, there's just this big wall of sound, and it just builds and builds, even adding this kind of orchestration to kind of fill out even more of the sound. So it's really epic in its scope and really works well for a progressive metal album of this type. Faceless Man is the ballad of the album, but it's really beautiful, and it has some great playing. There's some great soloing, even about 2/3 of the way through the track. So it's excellent as well. Great playing, great singing, beautiful dramatic vocals. I really love that track, and it's a great breather between these kind of two heavy epic pieces bookending it. Perpetuity is the next track, and it's kind of the big grand finale. It's like the culmination of all the stuff you've been hearing throughout the album. It's all in here in such a fantastic way. It all ties together really fantastically, and this is just a really fantastic closer. Complex rhythms, synth lines, vocals. There's that dubsteppy kind of sound like was on before, which is very, don't get the wrong impression, that's very subtle, and there's only a few sections where that comes across. But I like it as just kind of a unique element and something they're doing that's unique to them. So I just wanted to mention it. And there's just some crazy and interesting, intricate instrumental work, just like throughout all these other tracks, and great vocal harmonies, and just everything comes together in such a fantastic way to give this grand, epic, grandiose finale that an album like this deserves. So if you couldn't already tell, I really love this. This is going to be one of my top albums of the year. It's exciting for me when I discover a band that I've never heard of, but that I can follow and have the same kind of passion as I have for some of my favorites. So definitely, if you love progressive metal, if you love the style of bands like Dream Theater and Haken, should be right up your alley. I think there's so much here, and the musicianship is excellent. So many varied sections, and so much fun is being had here, and it tells a great story, and it's conceptual, and has all of the hallmarks of what I love about progressive music. So please check it out, and hopefully you've liked this review and what I've had to say about the album. Thanks for watching this video. Thanks for all the subscribers, for all you do to support me, and for the time you take to comment and to give me feedback. I really appreciate it. It's been really fun as I've been developing this channel to see some of these interactions and to be able to talk with people about the music I love. It's part of why I did this channel, and I'm glad to see that there is some of that. So please subscribe if you like what I do here, if you like these kind of music reviews and recommendations. I have a lot more coming up, a lot more albums that I'm excited to talk about. So please hit the subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, do all of that, and please let me know how you feel about this album or about progressive metal in general. And thank you again for watching, and as always, enjoy the music. Thank you.